Walsh are coming up. You know what? The stock market is at an all-time high because they believe in Trump's agenda. The Republicans in D.C. need to advance that agenda. We'll talk about it when Freedom returns at 5.
Dan and Amy, Amy, some people on the North Shore, I've gotten feedback, don't like when we do the Morningwood Academy voices to ridicule the North Shore.
Oh, come on. We're from Mount Prospect. We can never even park there to use their beaches. They're such snobs. But we were better looking anyway.
Okay. Well,
did you say something, Dan?
That's one tack, right? Another tack is this. The North Shore is worthy of ridicule. The North Shore is the home of some of the lowest information voters in the state. True story. You want to talk about low information voters, you think, it's in the poor neighborhoods? No. I mean, some, perhaps, but all of the hyper-educated in places like the North Shore, you think they're all deeply engaged and understand what's happening and know the details and are so intelligent. No, they're not. They're champagne socialists. They're completely detached. Not all of them.
Not all of them.
But that's what's taken over the North Shore, and that's why you have, that's why you have people like Comrade Daniel Biss as a state senator there now running for governor as Bernie Sanders' illegitimate kid. So don't tell me what has happened on the North Shore because I've seen it completely change over the last 25 years. And you know who's responsible for allowing that to happen? The Republican Party in general terms, people who live in these communities in specific terms. So let's take some ownership. If it happened in Wheaton, I'd be taking my share of the blame for allowing it to happen in Wheaton. Okay? So the good news is that there is a group of people. We talked to some of them during the race seminar flap thing at the high school earlier in the year. There's a group of people that are standing up to the Champagne Socialists because the destruction that is being wrought by them on the state as well as on the North Shore is now really manifesting itself, and people have had enough, and they're finally fighting back, and that's great. There's an organization called Nurture Neighbors that's been formed, and these are responsible, highly educated, professional people who are getting more engaged than previously they have, running for local office, going to school board meetings, things that should be happening everywhere, not just in Wilmette or Winnetka or Kenilworth or Glencoe or Highland Park. And this week, earlier this week on Monday, Steve Moore, who's also a North Shore denizen, or he was. He grew up in the North Shore, went to New Trier High School before going to U of I. He was there because he's supporting the effort as well, and good for him for doing that and going back to where he came from to try and help those who are standing up. He was there to give a talk on tax policy and economics, and it was a great talk, and to encourage the people that are getting active at the local level. And it was fun to see him. And now it's fun to talk to him again. He is Heritage Foundation economist, CNN senior economist, an economist for everybody and everything. Steve Moore, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. Boy, that was a fun night. I mean, first the Cubs win, and then I meet 150 conservatives in the North Shore. Who ever thought you'd have that many? And the thing is that it was really great to see that night. And I was kidding to people that we're going to make the North Shore great again. But it is amazing how left-wing that area has become. You call them, what did you call them, Champagne socialists? I called them Lexus liberals, and what has happened, I've seen this in communities throughout the country, is that people who have a free market kind of traditional values view of the world, are conservative, are being so beaten up by their friends and neighbors that they go into the fetal position and they don't even want to talk about this stuff, or else they're going to get browbeaten by their neighbors who feel they're so morally superior. And it's time for us to stop being shut up and shut down and to speak out about the issues that we care about. And we talked a lot, Dan, as you remember, about the minimum wage. Now, the liberals say, oh, you must hate workers if you're not for raising the minimum wage. Nonsense. And, the evidence is crystal clear that when you raise the minimum wage, some people do get helped and other people get hurt. The young and the least skilled people lose their jobs. I mean, the evidence is crystal clear on this.
Well, and the interesting thing, I mean, you mentioned the Seattle experience and the Maine experience in your talk. So that's real world experience. Also in Cook County, and you may not be as familiar with this, didn't come up that night, but the Cook County minimum wage tax increase had an opt-out for Cook County municipalities, and three-quarters of municipalities, three-quarters opted out, and in places, socialist paradises like Oak Park, they came within one vote of opting out. So, they get it at the local level. This is the most frustrating thing in places like the North Shore. They don't believe in theory what they do in practice. Most of the people there practice capitalism, but they reject it in theory.
That's true. And in fact, the in Seattle, when they had the $15 an hour minimum wage, they exempted a lot of the public employee unions and the unions. The unions didn't have to comply with the very policy they wanted to impose on others. And I did talk to some restaurant owners and retail owners at that event we were at, and they said, look, if you raise the minimum wage, we're going to have to go from 16 employees to 14 employees or something like that. We just can't afford it. But look, the point isn't whether the minimum wage is a good thing or not. It's let's have the debate. I mean, the problem with liberals today, they don't want to have the debate. They want to basically say you're morally inferior if you don't believe in our policies of higher taxes and minimum wage increases and more government. Great to coming out of the woodwork and saying, you know what, we're sick of this. And by the way, that's exactly why, if you're feeling isolated, I bet a lot of people who are listening to the show are kind of feeling like,
yes,
gosh, I have these conservative views, but I can't express them. Well, you're not alone, folks. I mean, this is why Trump won the election and why it was such a big surprise, because people told pollsters that what they wanted to hear, which is that they were going to vote for Hillary, and then they went into the voter box and they voted for Trump.
Now, do you think some of the Lexus liberals, as you call them, just feel guilty about their wealth? And, because is that a possibility?
Say that again?
Oh, they feel guilty about being wealthy, and that's one reason why.
I think there's a lot of liberal guilt, that they have a lot of affluence, a lot of wealth, and the way that they are going to apologize to that is by backing very liberal policies and very liberal candidates. And a lot of them are kind of hypocritical because they don't really want, as Dan said, they don't really want these policies to apply to themselves. They want the policies to apply to others. I mean, a perfect example of that is not a North Shore example, but is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett keeps saying, I want to pay higher taxes. I want to be a patriotic millionaire, billionaire. And yet he does everything he possibly can to avoid paying taxes. He's never going to pay the estate tax. He's never going to pay the death tax, any of this stuff. He's got the best accountants in the world, but he wants other people to pay higher taxes.
Yeah, the good news is that many of those champagne socialists on the North Shore won't have to worry about their wealth for very much longer if they continue to live in Illinois, because it's being eaten away from them like it is from everyone else. I wanted to get to your talk about tax reform at the federal level.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said, and I hadn't heard you say this before, so I'm glad you did. We talked at the outset of the Trump administration, and we had great trepidation about the likes of Gary Cohn, because these men of always from Goldman Sachs and the big banks turn out to be rent seekers, not free marketeers. And you had some critical words for Cohn with respect to tax reform.
Well, look, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Gary Cohn's. I mean, Gary Cohn was for those people who don't know who he is, he's sort of the chief economic advisor for the President Trump. And Gary Cohn was going to be the chief economic advisor for Hillary Clinton. And he's not a conservative. He's not a Republican. And so he doesn't get the message, and he's not very good, in my opinion, of making a case for this. And I just don't think having a Goldman Sachs executive talking about how tax cuts are good for working class Americans, I just don't think that the optics of that work very well. I mean, why is it, by the way, Dan? I mean, I've been in town, Washington D.C. for a long time through 5 administrations. The first thing they do is stock up Republicans and Democrats. They just stock up their administration with people from Goldman Sachs. I mean, it's like a revolving door from Goldman Sachs into the administration. And boy, I would love to see Larry Kudlow take that position. The rumor is that Gary Cohn will be out at the end of the year, and Larry would be a much better spokesperson for policies. And
no question.
And we got to get it done. I mean, the bottom line here, Dan, is what the message I really wanted to get across to people on Monday night, and I want to express this to your folks is this has to get done this year. Any Republican, I hope your Republican congressmen and senators are listening to the show. It has to be done this Oh, did I say Republican senators? I guess you don't have any.
No, we don't have those. We don't feature those here. No.
But it has to get done this year. The voters are getting agitated by the fact. I mean, conservatives are. I mean, a lot of people came up to me at that dinner, Dan, and said, "What the hell is wrong with the Republicans in Washington?
Yeah.
Why can't they get things done?" And I was like, "Well, how did they respond?"
Well, now, I want to get your take on this, though, too, because we've talked to other economists, free market guys like Jim Pethokoukis over at AEI, and Jim Urio is a CNBC contributor, and they're not as sanguine as you are about the economic impact of tax cuts as have been proposed. And it's good, but it's not going to be something that, unleashes powerful economic growth
right?
in and of itself. And so I wanted to get you to respond to that.
It kind of depends on the final product. I mean, if we can do the plan that Larry Kudlow and I wrote for Trump, which is get the rates down to 15 to 20% for our businesses, eliminate the incredibly unfair and un-American death tax, and lower tax rates for everybody. I do think it'll have a very positive effect. We are penalizing our businesses by the tune of 20%. Every American business that is doing business in global markets and competing against the Japanese or the Chinese or the Mexican companies, every American company is put at a 20% disadvantage right from the get-go, because we're charging our businesses 40%, and they're charging their businesses 20%. So it's just stupid. I mean, who does that? Who puts ankle weights on their own businesses so they can't run as fast as their competitors? I do think if we get this tax cut done and we get those business rates down, we can get to 3.5% growth. We're already growing at 3%, by the way, under Trump. So you get to 3.5%. A lot of these other problems, like the debt, the deficit, the infrastructure crisis, we have money for all of that. We can reduce poverty, reduce unemployment. All of the problems that we face as a nation are so much easier to solve if we get out of this Obama rut of 1.5% growth, which just doesn't cut it anymore.
All right, he is Steve Moore, Heritage Foundation and CNN economist, also Wall Street Journal columnist. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great day. Go Cubs.
And also that website, if you're a North Shore denizen and listening, NutriorNeighbors.org is the website for the event that Steve Moore was at, that I was at as well. NutriorNeighbors.org.
And he joined us on a turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a